talk about the New Orleans Saints. Right now, the Saints are 5-11 on the season, and they have a lot of things to address with this team during the offseason. When I look at Derek Carr, he has not been able to stay healthy this year. He's dealt with an oblique injury, and he fractured his hand just a couple of weeks ago. When I look at Derek Carr is not a bad quarterback, but Derek Carr is not a great quarterback either. Derek Carr is the definition of what is wrong with the New Orleans Saints. He's only so good to get you to a certain point. The New Orleans Saints have kicked the can down the road for many years now. They should have went out there and fully rebuilt this entire team when Drew Brees retired. Now, Sean Payton did stay on for one more season, and then he walked away. He retired at the time, but the man took a season off and he went to the Denver Broncos. He didn't want a rebuilding roster, and he saw the writing on the wall. This is going to be a complete implosion if the Saints don't go out there and fully rebuild. They've tried to retool this team over the last couple of years. It's not working. And ownership, they do deserve blame, but they have let Mickey Loomis go out there and run the entire show. Now, Mickey Loomis joined the New Orleans Saints in 2000. He did not become the general manager until 2002. He's been the general manager since then. He's the longest tenured general manager in the NFL. Injuries have played a huge part to why the season has been terrible for the Saints, but also they're not good enough. Mickey Loomis hired Dennis Allen to be the head coach. Dennis Allen was a very good defensive coordinator for the Saints for many years. He was an understudy for Sean Payton. But that is what's wrong with the New Orleans Saints. They're trying to live in the past. That is what is wrong with this team right now. You're not progressing forward. You're still trying to live off of what happened in the past with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. You have to let it go. And when they fired Dennis Allen over 3 months ago, that was a great sign for the New Orleans Saints to head into the right direction. You had Pete Carmichael be your offensive coordinator last season. You brought in Clint Kubiak for the first 2 games of the season. This team looked phenomenal. They were amazing on both sides of the ball. But you knew that it wasn't going to last. You beat the Dallas Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers. The Saints had a small window at the beginning of the season to make some actual noise, but they fell apart. When I look at this offensive line, the offensive line is not terrible. You have Talasay Fuaga at the tackle position. You drafted him in the first round. Ryan Ramczyk has missed his entire season. Now, Ryan Ramczyk may be able to return next season, but Ryan Ramczyk, before he suffered a knee injury, this man was regarded as one of the best tackles in the NFL. Now, I've seen offensive linemen go out there and miss a year or two and they come back. They're not the same player, but they're still able to be effective on the field. But I also seen David Bakhtiari with the Green Bay Packers. He never played another snap of football at this level from that knee injury, and now he's no longer in the NFL. I hope that's not the case with Ryan Ramczyk. It was a procedure that went wrong, and he had to miss his entire season. You do have Trevor Penning at the tackle position, and you have some other key weapons on the offensive line. You could bring in some more offensive linemen to help out Derek Carr, but Derek Carr holds onto the football for too long. The anticipation is not there, and he's a worse version of himself when he was with the Las Vegas Raiders. Derek Carr is the worst quarterback for this team because as long as he's playing, he's going to make sure that you don't end up with a top 3 draft pick. But he's not good enough to get you to the Super Bowl. Even in this division, Derek Carr is not good enough. And no offense to any fan. If you're a fan of the Buccaneers, Panthers, or even the Falcons, this is easily the weakest division in the NFL. And Derek Carr is not good enough to go out there and get this team to the NFL playoffs. And yes, last season, they went 9-8. They lost the tiebreaker to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You controlled your own destiny. And Derek Carr went out in the game against the Green Bay Packers. Jameis Winston came in. He basically lost in the football game. You can make that case. But the Saints had multiple opportunities last season to go out there and take care of business with Derek Carr. Dennis Allen was a terrible coach with the Raiders. You thought that things were going to be different with this organization? They were the same. And then you went out there and brought in Derek Carr to a big deal because they were looking for a franchise quarterback. Andy Dalton was not their guy. Jameis Winston was not their guy. Everyone understands that. And the same with Taysom Hill. Very good gadget player. He will never be a franchise quarterback in this league. And you have Derek Carr now. They may keep Derek Carr for one more season. But at this point, this man can't stay healthy. He's dealing with a hand injury. He's dealt with an oblique injury. I will move off of Derek Carr. Eat the dead cap. But that's also another point that has shown up with this team over the last 5 to 6 years. They're always in cap hell until the beginning of free agency. Now, give Mickey Loomis a lot of credit. You restructure a lot of deals. You kick the can down the road. But eventually, when that player is on the last year of his deal, he's going to want his full guarantees. And that's when it kicks in. If you don't believe that salary cap is a real thing in the NFL, look at the Los Angeles Rams a few years ago when they had a super team with Von Miller, Aaron Donald, Odell Beckham, Matthew Stafford. A lot of those pieces had to be traded off the team. And certain guys like Andrew Whitworth, they retired. So it did not work against the cap against them as much, but they were still in cap space hell. But they won a Super Bowl. When I look at the Saints, you're not even close to winning this division, let alone a Super Bowl. When I look at Spencer Rattler, I do believe that there's something there with him. I'm not going to come on here and say that he's going to be a franchise quarterback for the next 5 to 10 years. But right now, let him grow with Chris Olave. Let him grow with Rashid Shaheed. You may have to keep Derek Carr on the team for one more season because you don't want to be in cap hell. Because if you cut Derek Carr, that's a lot of dead cap space. But you go out there, you let him grow with Chris Olave. You give him the first team rush with Rashid Shaheed. And those are two key wide receivers that have missed majority of the season. Chris Olave got concussed against the Carolina Panthers. He hasn't played a game since then. And he's dealt with a lot of concussion problems with the New Orleans Saints due to bad quarterback play. Now, one of the concussions that he suffered earlier in his career, his head hit the turf in the red zone. That's not on the quarterback. That's just a freak accident. But when Derek Carr is flinching inside the pocket and you're throwing wide receivers into coverage, that's on you. This is why in the 90s, in the early 2000s, coaches went out there and told quarterbacks, when you throw across the middle of the field, try to guide the wide receiver. Don't just throw them straight into coverage. Derek Carr throws wide receivers straight into coverage. And it has hurt this team year in and year out because of that, even though he hasn't been with this team for over 3 seasons. But still, it has hurt the wide receivers with the New Orleans Saints. Rashid Shaheed is a very good deep threat. He's one of the best deep threats in the NFL. This man was having a very good season until he hurt his knee. You have Chris Olave, you have Rashid Shaheed, 2 very good wide receivers. There's talent in his roster. You still have Alvin Kamara. He's missed some games this season. He's a very good running back, and you just signed him to a 2-year extension, which tells me a lot about the Saints. They're not trying to rebuild, but they should. And firing Mickey Loomis would be a great start. But you have Alvin Kamara, very good running back that you can build that backfield around. You have him. You have Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller is a solid player as long as he can stay healthy. Jamal Williams has been a bust of a signing. They signed Jamal Williams when he led the league in rushing touchdowns with the Detroit Lions. But all of last season, except for just a few games, this man was injured. And when they put him on the field, they put him on the field as a special teams player, as a kick and a punt returner. He's one of the slower skill position players on this roster. Why the hell is he on special teams returning kicks? You could put Rashid Shaheed back there, and even if Rashid Shaheed is injured, put another wide receiver back there. You should never have Jamal Williams on kick or punt returns. And they did that in the Kansas City Chiefs game. You fired Dennis Allen. It doesn't make any sense for me to come on here and talk about the bad game plan that he had and how he cost his team, because I've covered that in the past. But overall, he's going to go down as one of the worst coaches in Saints history as a head coach. You have Foster at the tight end position with Juwan Johnson. I like their tight ends a lot. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had a lot of good moments this year. They picked him up off the couch. This was a man that had better chemistry with Derek Carr than Chris Olave. And I find that very interesting. Chris Olave and Derek Carr, they're rarely on the same page. But speed wide receivers like Rashid Shaheed and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, they're always on the same page with Derek Carr. That chemistry is just not there with Chris Olave and with Derek Carr. And sometimes it happens. The quarterback and the wide receiver, they never get on the same page, even if they're playing with each other for 4 to 5 years. We saw that with Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham. They never had the chemistry down pat. So Odell Beckham had to go elsewhere. And the same with Baker Mayfield. Doesn't mean that either player is just horrible. They're just not meant to play with each other. And that's okay. But I look at Chris Olave. I would rather have this young wide receiver than have an aging Derek Carr that's only a middle of a road quarterback. And you could possibly build this team around Spencer Rattler for one season. It just depends on how the cap space is going to look in the next couple of months. And Derek Carr, this is not the quarterback that the Saints originally wanted. This is a quarterback that Dennis Allen wanted because he coached him up with the Raiders. So we have to keep that in mind here. When I look at the defense for the Saints, it's just a bunch of aging players. Cameron Jordan is a rotational defensive lineman at this point of his career. They gave this man a 3-year deal. Cameron Jordan is not the same player that he once was. He's not going to go out there and give you double-digit sacks. This man's going to go down as one of the best defensive players in Saints history. At this stage of his career, why are we giving a veteran like this a 3-year deal worth a lot of money and guarantees, working against your cap space? Great guy for the state of Louisiana, great poster boy for the Saints, amazing locker room guy. At the end of the day, this is the business, and the NFL is about production. If you're not going to go out there and produce, they're not going to pay you. You need to see more out of Cameron Jordan, and this is a man that's on the back end of his career. I would not be surprised if he retires after this season. You have Brian Bresee, very good player, very good defensive tackle, love his game. He's one of the few bright spots on this defense on a week in and week out basis. When you look at Brian Bresee, he can get to the quarterback, he can stop the run. On the season, he has 7.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. You have Nathan Shepard, also a very good run stopper. He's solid to have. Kalen Saunders, very good run stopper. You can build around him. And the same with Carl Granderson, 5.5 sacks a season, 1 forced fumble. He led the team in sacks last year. Now his numbers have dipped, but he's getting double teamed majority of the time. This is why it's important to have a guy like Brian Bresee on the inside causing a lot of damage to go out there and put pressure on the quarterback. They brought in Chase Young, 5.5 sacks on the season, 1 forced fumble. Get him off this roster, because he's dealt with injuries in the past. And also, this is the type of move you go out there bringing a player like this as a rotational lineman when you're trying to make a Super Bowl push. The Saints are not in that situation right now. And Chase Young is a very inconsistent player. Some games he'll go out there, he'll give you 2 to 3 sacks. The next game, he's not even giving you a tackle for loss. The motor is not always there, and the effort isn't always there either. You don't believe me? The man got drafted by the Washington Commanders. They moved off of him. They traded him to the San Francisco 49ers. He played last season in the Super Bowl and barely did anything for the San Francisco 49ers last season in that Super Bowl. They moved off of him. He is now with the New Orleans Saints, and he was still recovering from a neck injury, and he missed a good portion of the offseason with the Saints. Not a horrible player, but just middle of the road. Another one of the middle of the road players that you have. I look at the secondary. Marshawn Lattimore got traded to the Washington Commanders over a month ago. Very good move to move off of Marshawn Lattimore. He's an amazing cornerback. Don't get me wrong. Just could not stay healthy enough with the Saints. When they needed him the most, he wasn't on the field all the time. And right now, he's dealing with an injury with the Washington Commanders to his hamstring. So that was a very good move. Move off of him for a mid-round pick. Because I look at the rest of the secondary, their secondary is strong. Paulson Adebo was a holding machine this season. Even though Paulson Adebo played bad, I'm not going to put it all on Paulson Adebo. And he does deserve a lot of blame. You have Dennis Allen putting this man on one of the fastest wide receivers of the opposing team. Paulson Adebo is meant to go out there and guard bigger wide receivers like DK Metcalf. Why is he on a wide receiver like Tyreek Hill? Why is he on wide receivers like Tyler Lockett? And the same can be said for Jalen Ramsey. They struggle against shorter wide receivers that are twitchier. But when they can go against wide receivers that are 6'2", 6'3", even 6 foot, they can go out there, jam them up at the line of scrimmage, and they can get leverage with them. It's those shorter wide receivers, they're going to give you hell. They had the man guarding Xavier Worthy in the Kansas City Chiefs game, and he was already dealing with penalties. And the same with Darnell Mooney in the Atlanta Falcons game. He had a major penalty that led the Falcons into scoring range and they kicked the field goal to win. That was the first matchup between these two this season. So now look at situations like that. Even though the player deserves a lot of blame, that's coaching. Why not just have him on Drake London and put Marshawn Lattimore on a guy like Darnell Mooney? And Paulson Adebo was struggling all day against the Atlanta Falcons. But you still have Paulson Adebo with this roster. Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, there's a lot of potential there. He can be a very good cornerback long term. Alontae Taylor, very good player. I like what they have going at those respective positions. Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu is still a solid safety. 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 6 pass deflections. He's 32 years old. This is a man that wants to make another Super Bowl run. He got a Super Bowl run with the Kansas City Chiefs. Won Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe he just wants to stick around with the Saints, but this can also be another player that you look at and say, hey, you know what? Let's move off you. Let's go out there and find you a home. Let's just try to get some draft capital. That would be even better for the Saints. And I'm not trying to come on here and say ship off all your veterans. That is unrealistic. You have Demario Davis. He has taken a step back as a player, but he's still solid in that linebacking room. I'm not saying go on here and just look at the Saints roster and get rid of everyone. No, you have talent. That's why it's so frustrating with the Saints. They have talent, but overall the team is not good. And I know a lot of Saints fans, you hear the name Ben Johnson, you get excited. I don't think Ben Johnson comes to the New Orleans Saints. I do believe that Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions, he may be the head coach next season. And you may roll your eyes. For the ones that don't know, this man was a former defensive back for the New Orleans Saints. And he's a very good defensive mind with the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions defense has been very impressive this season. And they have dealt with a lot of injuries. Majority of their defense is out on IR. That man is a very good coach. And I think that he can get a lot of players to believe in what he's saying, and he can fix everything that's going on with the Saints right now. But the biggest question that I have with the Saints, are you going to keep Derek Carr for next season or not? Because if you are, you're going to be stuck in the same situation. I think it's safe to go out there, see what you have with Spencer Rattler for one full season. He may not be the guy, and that's okay. If he's not, then you can draft a quarterback. But I know one thing for sure. Derek Carr for damn sure is not going to be your guy for the next 5 years. And it's no disrespect to Derek Carr. Can't stay healthy and can't win you big football games. And he's terrible against the blitz. And we saw him in a brand new system this year with Clint Kubiak. But knowing the New Orleans Saints, they'll run it back. They'll probably bring in Aaron Glenn and hope that he can come out here and fix all the veterans. But it doesn't work that way. When I look at this division right now, the Atlanta Falcons, they have Michael Penix Jr., a young player at the quarterback position. They're trying to head to the right direction. They just set down Derek Carr. The Carolina Panthers defeated the New Orleans Saints this year. Most of that is on Dennis Allen, but they lost that game by a point. And I look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They put up 50 points on this team's head earlier this season. And the Buccaneers have been dominant over the last few years in terms of winning this division and just going out there and making crazy playoff runs. Yes, with Tom Brady, but give Baker Mayfield his respect. And I look at the Saints right now. You have talent at certain positions, but bad coaching has held you back. But Mickey Loomis, right now, he's the biggest problem with the Saints. The longest tenured general manager, he's done some good things. And I remember that historic draft class that he had a few years ago. That draft class in 2017 will go down as one of the best draft classes of all time. Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Alvin Kamara, Alex Anzalone, and Trey Hendrickson. That's a great draft class. But they haven't had a strong draft class like that since then. They have had some good first-round picks like Brian Bresee, Chris Olave, getting Rashid Shaheed, even though he wasn't a first-round pick. That was a very good pickup. Taladse Fuaga looked solid. I think that he's going to be a very good tackle. But you haven't hit on every single draft pick. And in order for a team like this to go out there and fully succeed with older players, you have to hit on every single draft pick. Mickey Loomis has lost speed on that fastball, and it's time to move on. But let me know in the comment section below how you guys feel about the New Orleans Saints and what should they do in the future. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. I also want to speak on this before I let you guys go. They didn't score a single point against the Green Bay Packers a couple weeks ago. And you had Spencer Rattler, granted your team's beat up dealing with injuries. How do you not score a single point against a team in the NFL? You have NFL talent just like the Green Bay Packers, and you can't score at least a field goal? You got shut out. You had 0 points on the day. At least the Houston Texans put up 2 points against the Baltimore Ravens. Most importantly, I want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for watching the video, guys. God bless.